Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this week are freelance Ligue 1 writer Mohamed Ali, GFFM writer Eric Devin, and later in the show, our editor-in-chief Christian Nuri will also be joining us. Whoever said that Ligue 1 was a one-horse race, even this early on, the title race has been rocked, and an unlikely team sit at the top that will gleefully enjoy others tripping up. But we'll have more on that, the international call-ups, and some breaking news after a roundup of this week's news. The biggest story of the week is today's late breaking news that former Los Angeles Dodgers owner Frank McCourt has agreed to purchase troubled Olympique de Marseille from Margarita Lewis-Dreyfus. While the sale is not official yet, all parties expect the deal to be ratified by the end of the year. In on-pitch news, Marseille earned their first win of the Ligue 1 season on Friday, a 2-0 win at the Velodrome over Lorient with a goal and an assist from Relic Cabella. Lyon suffered a shock loss away at Dijon 4-2, a poor result but one that was made even worse by the club's announcement that both Alexandre Lacazette and Nabil Fekir are set to join Aldo Kalulu and Rachid Ghezal on the sidelines, with Fekir to undergo an arthroscopic procedure. In the multiplex, each of the 5 matches had 2 goals scored, resulting in 3 wins and 2 draws. At Nice, an early goal from Vincent Coziello was cancelled out by Frank Beera's goal, equaliser for Lille, and while Adama Diakhaby scored his first Ligue 1 goal for Rennes to earn the visitors a point at Montpellier, Daniel Congre having given the host the lead in the first half. Caen defeated visiting Bastia 2-0, Roddy Rodelin recording a pair of assists, while Metz also recorded a home win by the same score over a hapless Angers. The Loire Club, one of only 2 teams in the division yet to score. The other, of course, is promoted Nancy, who lost 2-0 to Guingamp, the Breton side becoming the surprise leader heading into the international break. Sunday's matches started with a hard-fought derby de l'Antique as hosts Bordeaux welcomed back veteran goalkeeper Cedric Carasso behind a makeshift defence of Jeremy Toulalan and Gregory Sertic. Despite the absences of the team's usual centre-backs, Le Girondins had enough to hold off visiting Nantes 1-0. In the early evening match, Saint-Etienne and Toulouse gave full debuts to new signings, Henri Saivet for the hosts and Hudson Edouard for Le TFC. But despite good chances abounding, neither they or their teammates could break the deadlock. Toulouse surprisingly still unbeaten after 3 matches. The weekend's big match saw defending champions Paris Saint-Germain travel to Monaco, and both managers employed a tactical shift, with Monaco playing a 3-5-1-1 and PSG reverting to last season's 4-3-3. Leonardo Jardim changes benefiting from some horror defending by David Luiz in a 3-1 win that sees them go joint top of the table with Guingamp on 7 points. In Ligue 2, Brest's trip to Sochaux this evening will see the winner atop the table, while surprising Amiens won again. The Picardy club level on points with Brest. The 2 French participants in the Europa League, Nice and Saint-Etienne, learned their fate in the group stages on Friday, with Les Verts drawn with Mainz, Anderlecht and Kabbalah, with Nice, while Nice, will have a much tougher time of it, playing with Schalke, Red Bull Leipzig, and moneyed Russian side Krasnodar. And that's all for the news. But remember, to keep up to date with everything to do with French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN, where we will provide you with around-the-clock coverage of the transfer deadline day on Wednesday. We start this week with the breaking news that Marseille are set to be sold later this year. Margarita Lewis-Dreyfus will sell her majority stake in the club to former LA Dodgers owner Frank McCourt, but he might not quite be the silver lining that l'OM fans are hoping for. Mo, what's your initial reaction to this news?
Well, my initial reaction was obviously one of excitement, because obviously there's been many months that the club was trying to position itself into a structure in which it can be sold to investors, in which now the club can recover from the frustrations of the last few years and position itself also as back in the French and European elite. But no one knew who the owner was right up until today. The new guy in charge, Frank McCourt, he hasn't appeared in one media report, one rumor, over the last couple of weeks and months since the takeover was announced in April. So it's obviously a massive shock to see him, with the owner and with the mayor of Marseille in some of the media reports this afternoon. And obviously, once his name did filter through, everybody, including myself, went straight to Google to look at his history, his net worth, his background, and obviously, a lot of unsavory and savory news articles, not least in the LA Times and in the New York Times as well, about his ownership with his previous team, the LA Dodgers, which I'm sure Eric will tell us more about. So obviously, at the end of the day, the bottom line is, we are hearing, at the very least, the sound bites that Marseille are now going to be entering into a new chapter. Funds are going to come through, and the team is going to hopefully return to its place among the top three in Ligue 1 and hopefully back into the Champions League. And this is a good sign. It's not just Frank McCourt; it's a consortium of American owners as well. And obviously Margarita Louis-Dreyfus and family will continue to hold a small percentage. So, now what we've been arguing and kind of been frustrated about for the last couple of months is an owner not willing to spend, an owner that doesn't care anymore. But now that's all set to change. Whether or not it's with the guy that we're all hoping for, that's time will tell. But at the end of the day, I think we should remain at least cautiously optimistic about everything.
Yeah, that might be the best way to go for this time at the moment. But let's get some more facts on the deal and what's happening with you, Christian. So what's the latest that we know about this deal?
Well, as Mo rightly pointed out, there hadn't been virtually a single news article written about Mr. McCourt. Actually, there was only one, and it was an interview with another individual, an intermediary, discussing the potential of Mr. McCourt coming in. And this was, of course, back in May, so a long time since his name has been mentioned. It was a very hectic day for a lot of, I think, a lot of the French media, as again, Mo saying that really nobody had a clue who he was. Even when there was a picture taken of him, still people were trying to desperately figure out what this deal is going to be about, who this man really is. I think, to be honest with you, we didn't learn that much today, apart from the fact, the very simple fact that Mr. McCourt now has effectively an exclusive right to negotiate and finalize the purchase of Olympique de Marseille. What this means, therefore, is that there is nobody now who can come in and try and better his offer. That is what this sort of exclusive deal with Margarita Louis-Dreyfus means. But apart from that, Mr. McCourt was able to give very little details about the project that he is going to put forward, which already worries me slightly. He gave 2 interviews with La Provence and also L'Equipe, and in both of those interviews he said very, very little about what he planned to do at Marseille, apart from the fact that he thinks Marseille is the biggest club in France and that it is one of the biggest in Europe. He claims that he can't talk about his plans, etc., because the deal has yet to be ratified, and Marseille and Margarita Louis-Dreyfus are hoping that that happens before the end of the calendar year. But if we cast our minds back to 2011 and QSI's purchase of PSG, Nasser El Khalifi and co were very clear even before their deal was ratified about the sort of players they were going to go and buy, the sort of things that they intended to do, and we've had absolutely no clarity today from the former LA Dodgers owner. So that worries me already slightly. I think the second thing that worries me as well is that he was asked a specific question by L'Equipe, I believe it was, saying, is he going to live in France when he finally takes over Marseille? He said he had no idea. He also said he had really no idea what his management team was going to be, or used some phrase like he's sort of outlining the contours of this project. This is all very frustrating for me, especially when you consider that just yesterday Gerard Lopez, the former F1 Lotus team owner, was still in talks with Marseille. So this suggests to me that actually both projects were sort of in the final round, so to speak, and ultimately Louis-Dreyfus went with Mr. McCourt. Now, that's very difficult, I think, for a lot of Marseille fans to take this evening, Gerard Lopez has since given an interview on RMC where he states that actually he had been speaking to Marcelo Bielsa a lot, and it looked like that actually Bielsa did that volte-face with the Lazio job this summer because he thought potentially he'd be taking over at Marseille again. So I think, to be honest, this is, again, it's come out of the blue. And Mo is right to be cautiously optimistic. We can't make any judgments on this potential deal until we know more details. But my point simply is the fact that we haven't been given more details today when the new owner has, or the new potential owner has had ample opportunity to do so, is slightly worrying in itself.
It does put the warning signs earlier, and a man who might know a little bit more, as we've already mentioned, is our man Eric, who obviously lives over the pond, and you know quite a few LA Dodgers fans. Eric, how were they with Mr. McCourt and his dealings with the baseball team?
Yeah, and I have two very good friends here in Eugene who are originally from the LA area, and really were not fans of McCourt. He had a very impetuous relationship with his front office team. He repeatedly overspent. Now, obviously, there is a nominal salary cap in Major League Baseball, but it's not something that really prohibits teams from having vast disparities in terms of ability to sign players to contracts. And just the way that McCourt has had a relationship with money in terms of financial dealings and front office personnel really worries me, especially in a country like France where you have the DNCG, who will be keeping such a close eye on things. And the other thing that I worry about, and this is something that I think we've seen time and again with American owners, unfortunately, in European football, is with the possible exception of James Pilata at Roma, most American owners don't seem to view European football teams as a competitive endeavor. You look at the case of someone like Ellis Short at Sunderland, someone like even John W. Henry to some extent at Liverpool. There are certainly player purchases, but they also come along with player sales. And I don't see McCourt at this point in time as being someone who's going to want to make a big splash and to boldly embrace the tradition of a club like Marseille. If he does that, he'd be the exception and not the rule. Like I said, Pilata is really the only American who, to my knowledge and to my experience, has had that sort of positive impact on the team. I mean, the Glazers with United, finally they're opening up their purse strings this summer, with Jose Mourinho in charge. But again, it's not, these American, owners are coming at this from a business perspective. They're not dyed-in-the-wool football fans. They're people who are coming into this sport later in life who see it as something that they can take a crack at. They see the money in the Premier League. I don't know what money McCourt envisions getting out of the French league, but the truth be told is I don't think that he has a full understanding of what it means to own a football club, and what it means furthermore to own a football club in France. Particularly, again, they are still France's biggest club, whether PSG like it or not.
Some interesting words there, and I do like to mention that I saw an article earlier retweeted by Tom Coast about the 10 worst owners in sports, and he was second behind Donald Sterling of the LA Clippers, who, being a Clippers fan, I know how atrociously bad he is. So there is some alarm bells ringing, isn't there, Mo? But is there maybe some hope of improvement? I
mean, I won't lie. I feel worse now than I did before I came on here. But there's a lot of questions. So like Christian said, there's the takeover process has been, we all knew that Marseille would soon be taken over as a club, maybe for about a year or two now, but definitely in the last 3 or 4 months, people that have had an interest in the club would have formulated their plans, and they've had 4 months to know, how much money can you commit year on year, what the long-term growth is, who you're going to bring in. Gerard Lopez has obviously, sounded out that he basically knew that he'd bring back Marcelo Bielsa, they spend about 80 million on the first windows, etc., etc. The fact that hasn't been filtered today, and all this is, at the end of the day, is an exclusivity agreement. We've been there before. 10 years ago, obviously, the Kashgar episode with at Marseille, where the Canadian businessman saw his bid agreed, and then as soon as the deal was set to be signed, all sorts of trouble came in and the deal was scuppered. But at the end of the day, I don't think we all get excited because obviously the current climate in European football is that when teams get bought out, you tend to think of the Man Cities, the Paris Saint-Germain, where you go from 0 to 500 million within a year. I don't think that's going to be the case with McCourt, with Marseille anyway. I think only in Marseille you kind of only need, and I say only here, but around about 50 million euros, 60 million euros to plug gaps. You need to build a competitive squad and hopefully keep that squad playing in the Champions League money, and year-on-year qualification for the Champions League will kind of sort out your finances long term, as we've seen before with Marseille throughout 2010 to 2012. So the reason why Marseille in this position right now is because Marguerite Louis-Dreyfus has essentially closed the purse strings. Essentially saying that I'm not going to provide another penny. So if you don't qualify for the Champions League, then you've got to sort out your own losses, and therefore obviously that's where the fire sale comes through, and you're selling the key players year on year. If you've got an owner that can plug those gaps and help Marseille through cash flow and budgets, and maintain a highly competitive squad, in France anyway, then I don't think those astronomical sums that people are thinking are required. With Lopez and the other American, personally, obviously with Gerard Lopez project, bringing Marcelo Bielsa back is obviously a dream for many Marseille fans. But the project by Guggenheim, the second American organization that were beaten to this agreement, I thought they also provided a very interesting project as well. And I'm a bit worried that, like Christian mentioned, that nothing is filtered through. We'd have to wait till the end of the year. But for somebody with a bit of a sketchy background, and there's lots of skepticism around his intentions, I would have thought the best thing to do is kind of outline your plans, go to the media, because we've seen talk before. I'm going to create the best team in the world. I'm going to win Ligue 1. I'm going to make this, the most fantastic club in the land, etc. That doesn't really amount to much. You need to see numbers. You need to see tangible state. First of all, you need to outline a plan, an organization chart, etc. Hopefully that comes around by the end of the year, and we'll start to see some movement in the January transfer window next summer. Until then, all you can do is hope and be optimistic.
Forever in eternal hope. It seems like it's the Marseille mantra at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Christian, obviously this deal's not fully signed until the end of the year. Is that when it's expected to be complete and everything handed over? And is there any road bumps in the way yet, or is this almost done and dusted?
Well, the reality is, Nathan, nobody has a clue. Marseille would like this deal. Marguerite Louis-Dreyfus would like this deal to be done before 2017 comes around. But the truth is that McCourt can now really do whatever he wants. She's signed an exclusivity agreement with him, which means that, as I was saying before, nobody else can really attempt to outbid or come in with something different now. And unfortunately, we're not privy to the terms of that exclusivity agreement, when it runs out, when it doesn't. I would like McCourt to prove us wrong. I think that Eric does paint the picture of the American investor into European football, and I don't see McCourt being very different from it. I think an example we missed is Stan Kroenke, who's of course come under a lot of fire recently from the Arsenal fans. So I'd love McCourt to prove us wrong, but the reality of the situation is this, as a business proposition, is a really lucrative one from a Marseille point of view. If the figures are right, and McCourt has managed to buy this for 40 million euros. This is a club with incredible potential in terms of merchandise, incredible potential in terms of ticket sales, and also within the DNC structure, it's a club with incredible potential to get in large sponsors, which would allow it to have a big budget for transfers. So McCourt has probably seen this deal, and I hope he's wrong, but I hope I'm wrong, but he's probably seen this deal as if he can get this for 40 million euros, he can make much more money than that by running a very steady ship and by putting in the money necessary at the beginning in order to make Marseille financially prudent. It is the club with the greatest potential in France, and potentially right now the greatest potential in Europe, I think, in terms of where it is now and where it should be. So McCourt's probably seen this as a fantastic business proposition. There's a reason why there were about 9, 10, 11 interested parties this summer. Let's not forget the Iranians, who were going to come with a massive deal, apparently, or so to speak. There was Iranian interest, sort of channeled through Paulo Tavares, who is a football agent here in France. there were all sorts of projects on the table, and I wish I knew what exactly McCourt has offered Margarita Louis-Dreyfus that the others hadn't. But unfortunately, it is a case of waiting and seeing. Now, Mo's right. Maybe that there is going to be considerable investment, or at least I'd expect a little bit more investment, than what Louis-Dreyfus was offering, because I don't think you can get really any worse than the way in which Marseille was run financially in the last 2-3 years. But I don't think that this is the project that Marseille fans have been going to bed and dreaming about every night for the last 3-4 months. I just don't believe it.
The final question on this is to you, Eric, and it's looking into the future. Do you think that this might be a match made in heaven, or do you think this is going to end in sort of a messy divorce?
Well, I mean, I think Christian makes a fine point about merchandising rights, but the fact is, where Marseille are on the pitch right now, they're going to need, investment to at least the tune of 50 million euros, I would say, to even come close to being where Lyon and Monaco are, to say nothing of PSG, to get in the Champions League, to start making any real headway in terms of being one of the top clubs in Europe. Again, McCourt has some money, but between his costly divorce proceedings and other business deals that have soured, I kind of wonder about what kind of cash he has on hand. I mean, similar questions have been asked in the recent past about John Henry, the owner of Liverpool. And I think this is the real issue for McCourt, that does he have the cash reserves to take this? I know there's staggered payments for transfers and ways to work around things, but we had a small discussion earlier on Twitter, and I mentioned Jeremy Clement from Saint-Etienne might be a good player to play alongside Diarra. Okay, he's going to Angers. Why? Because at this point in time, Marseille probably can't offer him the wages that he wants, and I can't imagine it's for competitive reasons, given how Angers have started the season. So, I mean, that's really where Marseille at. They need money to improve themselves on the pitch, and if McCourt's looking at this strictly as a business investment, and he's going to try and do it Ellis Short style, and spend the bare minimum to achieve a certain level, that's not going to engender any new interest in the club. It could drive them even further backwards.
Well, it's going to be interesting how this progresses, and unfortunately, it's probably not going to make the final bit of the window interesting unless he injects some cash into the club. But thank you, Mo, for joining us.
Thanks very much.
I knew you would have a nice hot topic about this, and we shall have you on soon enough.
Thanks.
We move on now back to things on the field and to the Sunday evening fixture where Monaco managed a 3-1 victory against PSG at the Stade Louis II. This is the earliest that PSG have lost a game in the last 4 years, and is the first time that they have been beaten in August in the Qatari area since that first game of their reign against Lorient in 2011. Christian, how poor were PSG in this one?
Well, Nathan, I dare say we warned you all in the Ligue 1 guide, the Get French Football News Ligue 1 guide. We said this could be the season where all of a sudden the French top flight becomes competitive again. And what we saw last night was brilliant for anybody who isn't a PSG fan. We saw Leonardo Jardim set up his stall with what was effectively a 5-2-1-2 or a 5-2-2-1 variation in the first half. And as I think you rightly pointed out on Twitter, a sort of 4-4-1-1 in the second half. Unai Emery had no idea what he was doing. I think some of the tactical decisions that he made yesterday, if Laurent Blanc had made them during his time at PSG, people would be calling for his head. He would have been absolutely slaughtered. So I think what we've seen here is a Monaco side which has been able to keep many more of its key players, than it did last summer. I thought Bakayoko was particularly very, very good at the heart of the midfield. Fabinho in this defensive midfield role, yes, it's not his preferred position, but he really is making it his own at the moment. Valère Germain's movement was brilliant oftentimes. And there was a great cohesiveness about the team, especially I thought in the first half. It was great to see Jamerson, the young Brazilian defender who was so hotly tipped to light Europe up when he first came from Brazil, looked like he had his first decent game for Monaco, which is, again, really encouraging. It's not an easy thing to do coming from South America to attempt to settle in a new country and indeed in a new culture. So generally speaking, Monaco were brilliant. PSG weren't awful, but this is what happens when you decide that you're going to rely on Edinson Cavani as your main striker. I find it absolutely dumbfounding, potentially the biggest mistake that QSI have ever made if they're going to go through this transfer window without signing another striker. And I think, yes, Cavani didn't do anything terrible yesterday, but his movement, his inability to find that wavelength that Ibrahimovic had with a Verratti, or Ibrahimovic had with Thiago Motta, and even Rabiot towards the end of last season, was a huge problem in PSG's attempts to build, because they simply were struggling with a rather flat 4-3-3 formation last night. Now, I also don't really understand why Unai Emery has switched from the 4-2-3-1, which works so well in pre-season, to go to this 4-3-3 formation. Now, they say in Paris that it is because they need to accommodate the central midfielders because they're worried about losing people like Blaise Matuidi, etc. I'm sorry, but if you're coming to a new country, as a fairly untested manager in Europe, because let's be honest, Unai Emery, yes, he's done well in the Europa League, but he is not a world-renowned manager, to come there and try and change your brand of football and the way that you play within about 3 or 4 weeks is a very dangerous thing to do. So generally speaking, there's a lot that PSG have to address, and I'm sure Eric will go into that in more detail shortly. But this is a fantastic result for Ligue 1, and really, why can't anything happen this season?
Yeah, it keeps that door wide open, especially this early on. And Eric, I want to talk about PSG's style and their tactics in this one, because I don't know if you felt the same, but especially in that first half, it looked like Emery tried to stick with that 4-2-3-1. Obviously, Pastore was injured and in the stands, but Verratti seemed so out of place in that slightly more advanced role, and it really upset the rhythm. And when they went to the 4-3-3, it didn't really help either.
No, I don't know. I just watched the match this morning. I didn't have a chance to watch it live yesterday, unfortunately. But to start these players in what is obviously your biggest match of the season to date in competitive football. I mean, maybe the Trophée des Champions might mean something. It's the trophy, et cetera, but you have Krychowiak, who is arguably your key summer signing. Say what you will about Hesse. Krychowiak's a player handpicked by Emery, brought in from his former team. We know he can get it done against a variety of caliber of opposition. Doesn't even see the pitch. Thiago Motta, is this a birthday present? He gets to start at the base of midfield. Rabiot was fantastic. I think that, as Verratti still is finding fitness, it seems to be the case, obviously not playing the whole match. I prefer to see a 4-2-3-1 with Krychowiak and Rabiot at the base of it. Both have good energy. Rabiot has a bit more physicality. Blaise Matuidi, I think given he came into the league at such a young age, he's such a high energy style. We saw it this summer. We saw it towards the end of last season in the Champions League. I think Blaise Matuidi is no longer the player he was 2, 3, 4 years ago. The energy's not there, and he only fits into a 4-3-3. I'm not shedding any tears if he goes. Get $25 million from Juventus. Get the money from a Premier League club and reinvest it into someone who can get you goals. That's the issue right now. I mean, again, strikers don't come a dime a dozen. We're seeing this wave of rumors about Julian Draxler. $75 million. I'm sorry, that doesn't seem like the answer either. I mean, Draxler did kick on a bit towards the end of the season for Wolfsburg, but I don't see him being a 20-goal a season scorer, or 20-goal a season scorer in Ligue 1 either. I don't see him as being a Champions League winning quality player, and that's QSI's ambition. That's the reason they brought in Unai Emery. That's the reason that they want to improve this season, is to get a player who can rotate managers confidently. Emery has had no problem doing that at Sevilla, who can adapt players that might have had a poor reputation into having a harder work ethic. And I think we've seen that to some extent. I think Lucas Moura's had a good start to the season, particularly in that regard. His defensive work ethos seems a lot better. He looks ready to hold down that place, which had been under some doubt under Blanc this season. So there are some positives. Thomas Meunier looks a good signing as well. But the fact of the matter is, playing a radical switch to accommodate certain players speaks to all the problems that undermined Laurent Blanc during his time at PSG, that undermined Carlo Ancelotti. Player power. And that's been PSG's undoing, is that certain lineups seem to work better in certain ways. I know Marquinhos is just back from the Olympics, but once all 4 center backs are fully fit, that is Kimpembe, Luiz, Silva, and Marquinhos, who are we going to see as the first choice central pairing? Because it wasn't Marquinhos enough last year. It was David Luiz because Thiago Silva prefers playing with him. So whatever's going on at PSG, player power and how it's undermining who I think is a very fine manager, Unai Emery, who has great ideas. Again, Christian, point taken in terms of his success. I think he's an upgrade tactically. I think he's an upgrade on player management over Laurent Blanc. But the fact of the matter is if he's not given free rein to really run this team as he sees fit, to please a 30-year-old, almost 30-year-old Blaise Matuidi, or what have you, I question whether PSG are going to be any better this year.
Yeah, and I have to question.
Sorry, Nathan. Can I just say? I think that's an excellent point, Eric. And I'm not saying that Unai Emery is a downgrade on Laurent Blanc. I just think that for his own safety as an individual, better to stick with the ideas that he had. As it's a great point about the player power, and I think this is exactly the issue. Who went to the dressing room at halftime when PSG were 2-0 down? It was Nasser Khalifi, the PSG president, and sporting director Patrick Kluivert. What sort of team is that being run? This is the third weekend of Ligue 1. This is the first time that Unai Emery is losing a match as a PSG manager. And all of a sudden, PSG president Nasser Khalifi thinks he should sort it out. I think Nathan's absolutely right. Unai Emery can succeed, but he absolutely cannot if he's got his hands tied behind his back.
Yeah, it didn't make any sense. And from my point of view as well, we mentioned those three in midfield. And if he's playing Verratti to please him or anything like that, I couldn't understand why don't you play someone like Rabiot in that centre attacking midfield position, who's not too he's much better box to box, but I'm sure he could fill that role better than Verratti managed to do, where he seemed a little bit too lightweight. He seemed like he couldn't quite find the space. It seemed very strange tactically to try and do something like that. And you've already mentioned the defenders, Eric, and Christian. I want to throw the man who's probably been thrown under the bus of this one, and that's David Luiz. He didn't have the best of nights again, did it? It was one of those nights for him, wasn't it?
Yeah, but we know who David Luiz is, and we know what he does. I mean, this is no longer a surprise to really anybody. In fact, it wasn't even a surprise to Chelsea fans immediately. They predicted it all when David Luiz was sold to Paris Saint-Germain. This is a man who was bought because Thiago Silva wanted his Brazilian buddy at the club with him. Nothing really more, nothing less. Otherwise, there's absolutely no explanation why you'd overpay so much for a central defender who is arguably not particularly good and who is hampering the development of one of the best young centre-backs in the world right now in Marquinhos. There's absolutely no other explanation. So I think it was almost arrogant the way that PSG set up last night. And I think that it's also arrogant that they don't think they're going to need to sign a striker to at least provide some form of competition to Cavani, who I thought actually didn't have his worst game last night, but positionally, vis-a-vis his teammates, still has absolutely no understanding with each other. And you're right, Marco Verratti did, at least in the first half, play higher up. We all know that Marco Verratti's best position is in a sort of Pirlo type of depth role. He's the individual who can do everything at the base of midfield, whether it's spreading the ball or intercepting the ball. So it was a bunch of bizarre decisions, but I think we also need to make sure that we do not detract from an excellent team performance from Monaco. I thought specifically the first goal via Juan Moutinho was a wonderfully worked team move. Djibril Sidibe proving exactly why he deserves this call-up that he's got to the French national team with his work and industry down the right-hand side. And I think actually if Monaco cannot be thrown any nasty surprises towards the very end of this transfer window like there were last summer with Anthony Martial, then we can see a fantastic title challenge from them this season.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting. And you mentioned one young defender that they're restricting in Marquinhos. I'm slightly worried about Kimpembe, who's been better than Luiz, if and when Thiago Silva and Marquinhos come back. But we'll chat about Monaco now and how successful they were. And I won't toot my horn too loudly about that formation that I dreamed up for them. And I'm more annoyed that I couldn't talk about it last week. But I was rubbing my eyes in glee, Eric, that they were playing the three at the back with two wing backs and the two centre attacking midfielders behind the striker. It just was worked to perfection, wasn't it?
Yeah, and honestly, on paper, we had bantered about this a little bit on Twitter yesterday. I was out with some friends during the match, unfortunately, and it wasn't on TV here in the States. I joked about trusting Andre Araji, but honestly, he's not great as a center back. He's not great as a right back. Play him kind of in between, and he does all right. I think that he provided great cover for Studibe, who, again, as you rightly say, worked really hard. But having Fabinho on that side of the pitch too, I think whatever potential damage you could have had from Raji was really ameliorated by the work of those two. Other side of the pitch, Benjamin Mendy, given that license to get forward and put in crosses, and he is a pretty decent crosser of the ball. He's just not the best defensive in terms of defensive positions and tackling. So he gets a bit of more of a free roll too. He's got Bakayoko on that side to help him out. Yeah, there may be something to this. I might switch the positions of Moutinho and Bernardo Silva to get more out of Silva. But other than that, I think this formation works fantastically well.
Yeah, and the real great thing about it, I thought, was it really smothered the centre of the pitch for PSG. I mean, there was about 5 players at all times in that area with Bakayoko and Fabinho, and then the 3 centre backs. That when PSG play that narrow style where Di Maria comes in and Lucas comes in, it's so restrictive in that area because there was no space for them to play, and because also the wing backs were so far forward, the width that PSG got from Kazawa and Aurier in the earlier games was completely negated because they couldn't get past those wing backs. They didn't want to venture too far forward because they were worried that they were leaving the gaps in behind. I thought it was absolutely genius to employ it at that moment, and you've already mentioned him, but Bakayoko's been fantastic so far this season, hasn't he, Christian?
Yes, it's 3 games gone, so we have to be careful, and also we don't want to alert any Premier League scouts with 2 days to go of this transfer window. But yeah, no, 100%. Very, very impressed with him. The thing that I'm most impressed about is how quickly he's progressed. It's been a very short period of time that he's got sort of any regular playing time, and the departure of Jeremy Toulalan has really allowed him to flourish so far. I think even Monaco were close to signing Joshua Guiavogi from Wolfsburg, and in the end Hardim said that he wanted to give Bakayoko the stage if they can keep hold of Fabinho as the 2 defensive midfielders this season. So that's really exciting from a Monaco point of view. I think your points tactically about Monaco 100% on the money, and I think that honestly it would be a real shame now if something which just frankly looks like it's going to be beautiful this season is broken up by a Premier League club in the coming hours.
Yeah, and congratulations to Monaco for a fantastic result that does blow Liga wide open, and a tip of the hat to Leonardo Jardim for finally taking my advice. But we'll talk
tuning in on the Get French Football News show. Yeah,
it clearly is either that or I'm copying his notes from somewhere. I don't know. That game in the Principality wasn't the only upset of the weekend, as Dijon locked off Lyon with a 4-2 win. Eric, why did Lyon fall away in this game?
Well, we had the Mapuyanga Mbiwa of last season pass a visit, unfortunately, or at least the first half of last season. Yeah, I think that the communication between the central defensive partnership and Lopez wasn't on key. I think that the fullbacks, again, Rafael, I'll keep saying it, is a liability. Rebus wasn't on par as we expected from him. Again, Darder not doing the work tracking back. I again would much rather have Jordan Ferry in that role. Just I think that Lyon probably thought that they would walk this, given the way Dijon has started the season, but they were fired up. And in Baptiste Renier, there's also a very, very fine goalkeeper. Abdelhamid and Shafiq, I think, are 2 superb pickups for them. Again, I mentioned them in the previous show from other Ligue 2 teams. This is a well-constructed Dijon side, and I think that we have rightly tripped them on the previous show as being probably the best of the 3 promoted teams, and I think that their performances thus far have far and away borne that out. You have a lovely performance from Samaritano, or sort of the cut rate Matthew Valbuena, if you will. But joking aside, yeah, just a complete team performance from Dijon. They were at the races. They were hungry. I mean, and can we say that Lyon's players are probably distracted by those call-ups? Lacazette, Fekir, that doesn't serve to help anybody. in terms of their concentration. I mean, yeah, Lacazette scored a great goal, but he and Fekir having to go off, you know, I just think it was just a lack of focus. Lyon didn't look at the race, and that's frustrating because the fact of the matter is, you know, on paper, Lyon should have walked this and should be top of the table right now. But you know, Dijon were desperate to get some points heading into the international break to continue some of the decent momentum they'd have at least in terms of their style of play, if not their results. Whereas I think, Lyon were just not ready for this.
Well, Eric's already mentioned it about Alexandre Lacazette and Nabil Fekir being called up to the senior French squad, but both were injured in this game. Christian, how much of an impact did that really make?
Yeah, sure. It made a bit of an impact. I thought Lacazette still had a good first half before he had to go off. I don't think Nabil Fekir is anywhere near the form that he was this time last year. I'm not blaming him at all. I think, you know, it's a very considerable injury that he's having to overcome with the ACL. And I think, to be honest with you, we're probably not going to see the Nabil Fekir that we saw, or that lit up Ligue 1 at times the season before last, until maybe even 2017. You know, hopefully he has been able to have a full recovery. Obviously, the news that he had to have a slight procedure again on the same knee today, which Jean-Michel Aulas says went well, is worrying because it suggests that whatever happened in terms of the first operation was not fully successful. So I think that is a huge worry for Lyon, that potentially Nabil Fekir, who had shown so much promise, is dealing with much greater physical issues than we thought he might be dealing with at this point in his recovery from the ACL injury. I think, to be honest with you, the big differential, at least at the start of the Bruno Genesio regime, between that and Hubert Fournier's time as Lyon manager, was the intensity of the press when Lyon didn't have the ball. I thought that was fantastic in the last 6 months of last season for Lyon, and really did make a difference. I thought, to be honest with you, on the weekend it was fairly disappointing, and I've not seen a Genesio side looking that, generally speaking, lackluster since he took over. So I think that's also an alarm bell. Look, I think that professional footballers, if Lacazette's head is turned, or Fekir's heads are turned by an international call-up, then this should serve as a very stark lesson, because this was Dijon. You know, and again, Dijon themselves, often at times, at least in the first half, struggled to really string more than 4, 5, 6 passes together. This is going to be a side, we've highlighted, I think very rightly, this is a side that has the potential to stay up. But this is a side who definitely needs to be in the market for another centre-back to partner Abdelhamid. I think that there are several deficiencies in the side. Maybe also they could do well to pick up a defensive midfielder. So honestly, this was a fairly embarrassing result for Lyon. I think also people are not giving enough attention to Nicolas Nkoulou. I have not been convinced by Nicolas Nkoulou for the last 18 months. He is a player who we know can be extremely good, that sort of modern centre-back, with the pace and alertness required to really dominate not just Ligue 1 opposition, but also European opposition. But I was worried that it would take him a long time when he arrived at Lyon to find the Marseille form that he displayed almost in 2013, 2014. Now is the last time that I think he's been consistently impressive. So I think Lyon are dealing with that. And then, of course, their other option is Mamona, who still can't speak a word of French and is struggling a little bit to adapt to life in France. So I think Lyon have some real issues to address, and hopefully Genesio can work on those during the international break.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, but let's talk about Dijon and how much success they had. And it's a positive sign, really, Eric, that 2 substitutes were the ones who scored the 2 goals that were the difference in this one.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I've got to confess, I don't know much about Lise Melou, but wow, what a goal! That was really impressive. Bambula is, again, a youngster, I believe, on loan from Monaco.
Yeah.
That's correct. Again, this is the first time I'd seen either one of them play. But yeah, this is the thing. I think that, you know, with Dall'Olio's, it's a fairly veteran team, right? Amalfitano, Samaritano, Beaumont, you know, Dioni's a little bit younger, but by and large, these players are very experienced. And I think for someone like a Bambula, there's going to be much more of a willingness to go all out, to go guns blazing for that brief period of time for which, you know, they might they might get a cameo. I mean, again, Bambula was introduced early in the second half, I believe. But again, they see these opportunities as rare. So, they're going to do their best to fit into a system, to play with energy, to be a live wire, and not only that, but to see Lyon as a scalp. Particularly in the case of Bambula, if you're a lone player and you can torch a team that's in the upper echelon of Ligue 1, which Lyon is, poor results or not, you're going to get that much more notice, whether it's from your parent team or from other teams around Europe that could be watching this game for various reasons, and you're going to raise your profile. I mean, let's face it, if Dijon had beaten, say, Angers or Montpellier 4-2, there wouldn't be the same sort of shockwaves, if we can really call it that. But because it's Lyon, because it's a Lyon team that had been on fine form, it garners quite a bit more notice, and I think that those younger players in particular coming on are going to be that much more motivated to make a positive impact in the game.
Yeah, and it's important for newly promoted teams to get off to a decent start, and this kind of win can be a real jump-off point for them, especially scoring their first goals of the season as well. But we'll move on to affairs that, even though we're 3 weeks into the season, it's already time for our first international break, and Philip will be at home cursing his luck. But we'll look through the first round of call-ups, and there's been a fair few new names thrown into the mix, and we've already mentioned that with some injuries over the weekend, there's been a few more added to that. But Christian, what do you think to the squad as a whole?
I don't have much to complain about. I think the only thing that I would say is if Patrice Evra is now past his sell-by date in Didier Deschamps' mind, then I think so should André-Pierre Gignac be. I thought he was wholeheartedly disappointing at Euro 2016. He's not an individual who's going to improve. He's not an individual who's likely going to be at the next World Cup, so I don't see any point in having him in the squad whatsoever. I think initially Kevin Gamero should have been called up instead of Gignac, and I hope that is the sort of strike force that France look to attack these next round of World Cup qualifiers with in the future, after obviously this round of matches. One that looks like Lacazette, Giroud, Gamero, and then potentially some other wide players, but those three being the important strikers for me. So yeah, I think, to be honest with you, it's an impressively bold squad from Didier Deschamps. It was about time that both Sébastien Corchia and Djibril Sidibe got the call up. I think they both deserve a go, even if he's only done it because both Jallet and Sagna had slight fitness concerns. The omission of Eliakim Mangala at centre-back is not at all surprising, and Varane will come back in and try and make that right-sided centre-back spot his own again. I think Kurzawa has had a very, very good 3-4 months, a very good start to his PSG career under Unai Emery. Looks like he's now going to be the obvious first-choice left-back, and we all know his attacking potential. He's still got a bit to work on defensively, especially with positioning, and notably from set pieces as well, in my point of view. But I think Kurzawa versus Digne is for now the right pairing at left-back for Didier Deschamps to go and attack this Russian World Cup with. In the midfield, many people might have said we could have seen Rabiot staying with the under-21s because they got some important games coming up in order to qualify for Euro 2017. So I think all in all, a fair squad. People will still complain about Johan Kabay. Obviously, he ended up being injured and then missed out anyway. And Moussa Sissoko. But we know now Didier Deschamps likes to latch on to people, make them his sort of chouchou, if you like to say. And Moussa Sissoko will be in and around that squad, barring some sort of miracle for the next 2-3 years, definitely.
Eric, I want to talk about some of the new boys that are in the squad, and that includes those that came in because of injuries. And the big headline one for us and for Borussia Dortmund fans as well is Ousmane Dembele, who's had a meteoric rise really over the last 6 to 9 months, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think that he brings a lot of positivity to the team, a lot of excitement. I think that his versatility is a real big feather in his cap. He can play basically all across the front line. He's looked good in preseason for Dortmund. I think that he's getting used to playing with players of a higher caliber, and that's going to serve him well in the national team too as well. Playing with the likes of a Martial, a Gamero, a Griezmann. He's just playing football at a higher level, and but he still has that sort of exuberance that, I think the live wire cliche that I think most international teams need to have as a change of pace off the bench, and hopefully he gets a good run out. I'd be surprised to see him start either match, but I'd like to see him get perhaps 20 minutes in both. So yeah, I mean, well done for him. I think it's fully deserved. The right backs too. I think these two have been bar Sorgerier, probably the two best right backs in France over the past couple of years. I know CDB was played at left back at Lille, but we've seen again in midweek against Villarreal how well that went and why he's a much better natural right back now that he's playing that position in Monaco. I do feel for Jallet. I still wish, and again, there's a bit of homerism here. I wish he had gotten a bit of a chance at the Euros. I don't think Sagna was anything special, and I think Jallet would have offered a little bit more. Rami is a bit puzzling for me. I think that, again, this is Deschamps with his right-left favoritism again. I can't think of anybody off the top of my head that I might choose to replace him, but I mean, he's 31 in December. Is he really going to be an important part of that team in 2018? I struggle to think of that. And Dogbia, though, is probably the player with whom I have the most issue. I think he was not very impressive last year at Inter. I saw him play there a handful of times. He was, I saw him play against PSG, and yeah, okay, great. I understand that you need Tolisso, you need Rabiot, you need these under 21 players who are still eligible for to give them a major tournament experience before they become an important part of the national team. But yeah, that's a little frustrating, that especially given the start that Rabiot's had to the season, that either he or Tolisso or even Maxime Gonalon weren't given the call up ahead of Kondogbia. I think that's on name only, and it is again, as Christian rightly says, one of those players who enjoys this somewhat unexplainable relationship with Didier Deschamps and is going to be called not regardless of form, but perhaps despite form.
Christian, how do you think Kevin Gamira will fit into this squad? I mean, it's his first call up in a long while, and he's only come in due to injury. Do you think we'll see him at all, or do you think he might be on the periphery, really?
No, I think Didier Deschamps got some interesting decisions to make. Olivier Giroud has played about 20 minutes of competitive action in the 2016-17 campaign in all competitions with all teams so far. So the question is, does he play Giroud up front immediately against Italy in the friendly? I reckon it'd probably be Gignac that starts against Italy, and then Giroud might come on and then start in the World Cup qualifier against Belarus. I like Gamero. I think he should have been at Euro 2016, and dare I say it, if he had been at Euro 2016, and that Gignac chance that Gignac gets in the 90 whatever it was minute, where he hits the post after scuffing that shot, I hate to say, if Gamero had been in that position, maybe the summer would have been more enjoyable for us all. But I think that was the one glaring omission for me in the summer squad for Euro 2016 that Didier Deschamps picked, and I'm delighted that he has the chance now to make his mark, because Deschamps does have this sudden, I think Eric's alluded to it a lot, but he has this sort of weird process of picking players where once he's decided that he likes the individual or doesn't like the individual, it's then very, very hard for you to really change his mind in either direction. I think you saw that with Dimitri Payet. There was virtually picketing to get Payet into the French national team last year. And only after a huge media drive did Payet actually get his chance, and then obviously Payet took it, so Deschamps couldn't really then omit him again. So Gamera has the chance to make himself undroppable now. I think just on the centre-backs, I'd echo Eric's sentiment about Adil Rami. I think that we're heading towards 2018 with what's likely going to be a ticket of Umtiti, Koscielny, Zuma, and Varane. And I think that Zuma probably will get a call-up within 4 or 5 months and replace Rami once he's got more consistent football after a considerable injury that he suffered last season. So I think, look, you only have to look at the under-21 team, the under-19 team, to just realize how special and how fortunate we are with the amount of talent that France has at its disposal now, but also in the coming 10 years almost. So I think that this is a good squad, a squad which has the right balance of keeping change and continuity from the Euro 2016 work that was done, but also bringing in some individuals with a view to 2018. And I'm looking forward to seeing Les Bleus have competitive action in these qualifiers for the next 2 years.
Yeah, they've got a very interesting group in that qualification. But one final question about the squad to you, Eric. And Hugo Lloris obviously misses out through injury. He'll be out for a couple of months yet, and it leaves an open gap in that goalkeeping position and between Mondonda, Areola, and Costil. Who do you choose to play that? Because there's only one of those who's had regular game time so far.
I'd like to see Ariel get a chance. I thought he was fantastic in preseason PSG. So yeah, that would be certainly my mandate. The other thing I would say is Aymeric Laporte. Again, I would like to have seen him get a look in ahead of Rami, even if he doesn't stick with the squad heading into 2018. Yeah, just a final thought there.
Yeah, that's all right.
I think with Laporte, Eric, similar from Deschamps' point of view in the sense that he's just come back from a severe injury. But I agree, 100%. And I think actually the Laporte situation was quite critical because he's already been making noises about becoming, playing for the Spanish national team. So I think that's a really urgent one that Deschamps needs to tie down.
Yeah. Well, I mean, right. If we look at Ramos and Piqué are both 30 this year, 29. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a worrying one for Deschamps to probably jump on. Just very quickly, Christian, would you start Mandanda even though he's not had too much football with Palace so far?
I think it's a crying shame that Areola is not or has not been picked as PSG's first choice goalkeeper this season. I mean, aside, I think Steve Mandanda will play both games. I think that's just my prediction. That's my Didier Deschamps logic hat going on. I think I'd like to see Benoit Costil maybe play the friendly because I think players should be rewarded for gaining consistent playing time with their clubs. But I think we'll see a Mandanda ×2 ticket.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one and an interesting friendly and qualifier against Belarus to boot. But that's it for this week. It's been a busy one this evening. But my thanks to Eric, Philip, Christian, and Mo, and to everyone listening at home this evening. There is no preview show on Thursday, so enjoy the weekend of international fixtures, and we will see you at the same time, same place next week. A bientôt and goodbye.